Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Phil, for reminding me.
Well, for any consolation, earlier today, I thought, dang on, that thing's at 5. I better hurry up.
Oh, wow. I'm so glad it's
Be
not.
there.
That one of
So I-
that 5 really messed me up. Oh,
Right, we are live.
Okay, ready to go?
Yep.
All right, I will call the second comprehensive plan workshop, I said second, right? To order at 6:14. And start with the roll call. Brooke?
Brooke,
Oh,
Start with roll?
here, sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, Alec Robinson here.
Phil McDuffie here.
Sarah Hudson here. We also have Ashley Wyman, interim city administrator, and our comprehensive tax course chairman, Tom Farrell. All right.
Thank y'all very much. Tom Farrell, 3223 Park Hills Drive. We have 2 items on the agenda tonight to go through. One is our current land use plan, which is pages 16 through 23 of the comprehensive plan. And I'm just going to go through these. Again, if there's any questions or comments, this is a workshop, so we'll just, it's very informal on that. And what I'm going to start with is our key takeaways, and then I'm going to be at the map. We're a residential city, and that's why our citizens, if y'all will recall from last time, the single biggest thing that we had as a takeaway on our survey that we did was our citizens like us to be single-family oriented city. And as you can see by our percentage of our land use, which is 69%, that's what we are. Office is 14.2, and retail uses is 7.5. Now, this doesn't take into account the governmental use in our park areas that we have on that. This is just our land use that we have for that standpoint. And I'm gonna address the map to go through this a little bit. And I do want to point out, this is not a zoning map. We'll go through the zoning map in a second. But this is our current land use map.
Our folks at home might be able to hear you. Do you mind yelling a little bit?
I'll try.
Okay.
I do want to point out, just so everybody knows, you'll note these little white lots here. All that means is that they were vacant at the time that this map was produced. And we'll all know that there are several of them that currently have houses on them. So this map has that kind of, this is a snapshot that was done. So that's a residential part of that. And I just want to go through the Bee Cave Road part just to make sure we all understand that. I am going to point out this one lot, and I think I brought that up last time we were here. This one lot on Rollingwood Drive, I believe that if we research that, we're going to find that that is zoned commercial, even though it's being used for residential on that. So we've got our offices in the dark blue on that, and we have our civic institutions, which includes the hospital district and the hospital and the church in a lighter blue, and then we have the retail in red. And remember, we've got twice as much basically in office as we have in retail in square footage on that. Now that does not take into account the PUDs. We have C1, C2 zoning, and we have PUDs. Now, we do have some, I want to point out to people on our land uses that we have on this, that we have a couple of issues that go through with that. One is, like, banks require a special use permit when they open. And I believe restaurants also require a special use permit that comes in. And I'd like to make sure that, just from a standpoint of clarifying that, if for some reason they don't, they probably should, because they do have the ability to impact by smell and exhaust their neighbors nearby. So I think that would be prudent to look at if we don't have that. The other thing I'll point out on our commercial deal, we still have a ordinance that provides for our businesses to shut down at 10 o'clock at night. And as a city, depending on restaurants, that could be, that may be something that we'd have to have our city attorney look at as to how that would impact restaurants with a special use permit on that. The other thing I'm gonna point out that I think everybody knows, but I wanna make sure that we see it, we have 24 smaller lots that are located on the south side of BK's Road that are residential. And that's a Tremont development on that. Any questions on that? Sarah, you had a couple comments. Oh, you were talking about the lots being changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they will be. And this was just a snapshot that was done. So.
Like once I said, it'll change every other day, so.
Especially here on Park Hills. Right now. It was our turn, that's all I can say. It happens. So, there are a few vacant tracts in here that are a little bit different shade of white. I'm about colorblind, so I can't very well tell on that. This is the track, and I believe it is, correctly, I believe it goes even further to the west than this is shown. This is a vacant tract that's owned by the city of Rollingwood. And then we have another vacant tract that's down here, part of which is owned by the city of Rollingwood and part of which is not owned by us. Any questions on land use?
So it looks like there's is there a vacant spot between the church and the PUD where the Rollingwood Town Center is? Not the Delana thing, but
You mean
that,
here?
yeah, that, what is that?
This is part of the church land.
Okay,
It's just vacant. This isn't ownership or
Okay.
zoning. This is just strictly land use
Okay,
that's been done
okay.
on there.
okay.
So, and you'll note same thing with these two lots here that haven't been developed
Okay.
or built upon. Now, I will point out, these little areas here are not real lots per se. When this cul-de-sac was developed, if you bought this lot, then you got the one across the street. It was just a small little lot that you could use as a garden or whatever you wanted to do with it. It's not sizable to build on, and most of it's in the floodplain,
Mhm.
or some part of it's in the floodplain. I shouldn't say most of it. And the other thing I want to do, make sure that everybody understands that's listening, we are required under Chapter 211 of the Texas Local Government Code that zoning regulations must be adopted in accordance with the comprehensive plan. So if it's something that the city council or planning and zoning doesn't like about the recommendations of the comprehensive plan, then I read that it's prudent to change that before you get to adopting the comprehensive plan as it is. I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying that that would seem to me to be something that would be prudent to look at. I think I've gone through the existing amount of land use, that would be on page 17. On page 18, I'd like to kind of go through our zoning a little bit, if you can pull that up. We have two PUDs on Bee Caves Road. We have the Rollingwood Town Center and the Mira Vista PUD. Both of which, this PUD did not have, I think they had one area right here that they showed to be potential retail or bank. They chose to put a bank here. But I think that was, their PUD, as I recall, allows that to be expanded to retail on that. The Mira Vista PUD does have the ability, obviously we've got Trader Joe's, y'all know that, but part of this other area as you go, if you went into the Mira Vista Shopping Center and took a left, that part also was allowed to put in retail in there under our PUD agreements. And it might be wise to, before this is finally adopted, is to make sure the council has the, that PUD uses on both those PUDs to kind of look at, to make sure that we're not, they know what they're getting when they adopt a plan and the PUDs are already in that usage. We do have a hospital district on this, which is located obviously next to the hospital. And we have medical offices here that we have on here. So we have several different zoning categories. Obviously we have C1, which is our professional and business office district. We have C2, which is the business district that we have that is located in the retail sector. We have the government and institutional, which on this map is listed as both the hospital and the church sites on that. Or excuse me, just the church site.
And City
on
Hall.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
And
the church.
City Hall.
And City Hall.
Yeah.
So, and then we have the hospital district here. This is actually Center 3 that was built there. It's a little 14,000 square foot building. It has some medical doctors in there, but it is just strictly an office building. And it's not tied directly, I don't believe, to this hospital for whatever information that's at. Our park district, and then we have the PUEs, and this is a area right here, the 24 little single family houses, that has a PUD type of deal. This is the little heritage buildings that were done, which are really nice, but they're there, they're office use. And this is, of course, Mira Vista, and this is Rollingwood Town Center on that. And then we have our rest of them is residential, with the exception again of one that we probably need to look a little more carefully at. And we show something that's undeveloped street right away, and I'm just not sure what that was supposed to be very honest. There's a little alignment issue that comes in. This was we own this 5 acres here, and then Rollingwood actually still owns that undeveloped street portion of it. It was dedicated to the city, it was just never made into a street.
Isn't that part of the drainage right now?
Part of it is, I mean, it's got that's the one good reason the street wasn't put there, because we got the creek running down through it. But there was room on either side of that, because the creek kind of turns a little bit more this way,
Yeah.
and it continues on to that. But that is part of our city on that. And and then I'm gonna point out one that was recently added. This property is in the city of Rollingwood, I understand, and it abuts, Stratford, our one that abuts Stratford. So,
The whole lot is in the city of Rollingwood?
If you,
Or does the city boundary cross the lot?
it may be that that's the, I'm sorry, sir, I think you are correct. I think the part of the lot is in Austin and part of it is in Rollingwood. I stand corrected on that.
Well, cause there's the other map.
We can go back.
Yeah, no, the one that we were on before the land use has it jutting, like the property.
Yeah, see, this is the one, and this one was just determined to be part in Rollingwood and part, in fact, we have not been collecting taxes on that till we took a look at it. And I think that's only been 90 days, maybe 6 months.
I'm not aware of something that recent. I do know we came up with this in an election question about where they voted.
Yeah.
And it came down that they could choose because they were half and half. That's the last I recall. Amber might have been part of that other.
Yeah, and Sarah, I don't know the answer to your question. I just looked at this map and went,
Right.
it's there. I can tell you that boundaries do go across lots because the City of Austin, AISD, and Eames and Westlake go through the house behind me on Ridgewood. And at one time, Eames was asking where are the kids' bedroom to see on that, which I thought was not useful, but they did ask them that. So, and Sarah, that's something that we probably.
Yeah, well, to me, it was just an issue of who gets the taxes, you know,
Yeah.
and.
Now, there's also been some questions raised about Zilker Clubhouse. I don't have the answer to that, whether or not we actually gave that to the city of Austin. I understand years and years ago.
Well, what did you do that
Why?
for?
I'm old, but I'm not as old as that when that happened, so I can't tell you. We also used to have some boundaries that were cross Mopac and cross BK's Road on the south side of this area. I understand. So, that's for my time. Okay. The biggest thing, and I'm gonna bring this back again, one of the biggest things we've had that came up, we wanna be a residential city. We wanna protect our residential areas, but we also wanna be able to have, be able to walk and bike to the commercial district and have retail and restaurants on our on our commercial district along BK's Road on that. Those issues were brought up time and time again on that. So I'm gonna go ahead and skip over to 19, page 19. And I don't think that this is, I think y'all can probably look at this. There's not really any takeaways that I had on those pages that you could, of 19 and 20 and 21, and actually 22 and 23. My next ones were the future land use on that. And this is where I think that we should spend our effort tonight on some recommendations we have and some feedback we got from our citizens on that. And I'll pause here for, are there any comments or questions on the current land use that we haven't touched on?
I'll just make one comment that I don't think we've explicitly said this anywhere in the comprehensive plan, and that is that for the office properties, we don't get much sales tax, but we do get a little bit from some of those properties. But we also get a fair amount of personal property tax, which commercial businesses pay on their fixtures and equipment and other things within that property. So we do get in addition to the property tax, we also get a personal property tax on those properties. So just a comment.
Well, I don't know where the appropriate place is to insert this comment, but I had somebody suggest that some of these office buildings, especially the Rollingwood Town Center, that the PUD does not,
Oh.
Y'all are on camera.
the PUD does not allow them to have any restaurant in the building. And that if that was something that we could, I mean, because a lot of office buildings have like a little
Yeah.
deli or a sandwich shop or a something, you know, so that people having a conference or having a meeting through lunch, they can order and they just, you know, that would provide a lot of sales tax if we would have, in addition to being on the north side of Bee Caves and accessible without having to cross over for people that wanted to get there, and if we did the Delana Lane
Yeah.
access, then it would be easily accessible from Rollingwood, and that would be a way to get some sales
Yes.
tax from,
And
The
most
office
of those
building also.
are very small operations, and, the only two issues I have with restaurants that I've had over the years is we did have, you may recall this, we did have at one time an issue with the exhaust smell coming out of a restaurant that was giving some of our neighbors some issues. A new vendor went in, put in the proper equipment, and it was solved. But that did have an issue, and so that was there. Can you go back to that zoning map once again? I'd almost forgot about this. In fact, I had forgotten about it until you brought that up, sir. Thank you. Whoop, that's good enough. This area, which is Center One, at one time had retail shops in it, had some retail shops in it. There was a sporting goods operation when it was first built that was operating out of it. And I'm not sure back in those days I think we just had one zoning called commercial that went in on that. But that was, I thought, an excellent location for something like that, or a pub. So, and Sarah, we actually had gotten I'm glad you brought that up, and I had forgot about this part too, but we had actually gotten a little comment back from the manager of Rollingwood Town Center asking about that, as to whether they could do it. I don't know if I'd have to go back and reread our PUD agreement, whether they classify that as an ancillary use of the office building or not, or that's something that y'all can figure, but I can't see a downside to it.
well, to me, there's a difference between having a barbecue joint that's got smokers going
Yeah.
24/7 and a deli that,
Yeah,
you know,
Would-
is slicing up stuff and
yeah.
not really creating the odor problems.
Our coffee
Or-
shop.
Yeah, or even
Right.
the cafeteria for the employees that are working there, so they
Sure.
don't have to,
Right.
you know.
One other property that's kind of interesting from a residential access basis is the property at the corner of Rollingwood Drive and Bee Caves Road across from the McDonald's. That's a 3-story building today, or 2 stories with parking underneath,
Right.
that could be an accessible restaurant. You know, you don't have to cross Bee Caves Road to get to it.
Right.
So that's also kind of a potential property for a nice restaurant or whatever,
Yeah.
other accessible use.
We also, this little area, Sarah, that you were talking about earlier, that little,
Off South Crest.
off of South Crest,
Abandoned road.
we actually had, the engineers do some design work on that. You may, I think you were on the council then, to figure out what it would take to channelize that creek at that time and to be able to utilize, more of that property from both an access standpoint
Right.
or, or park or whatever we did with that.
Right.
Now, they've done that on the lower portion of Dry Creek, where Rollingwood Town Center is. They had to get a coma for that and get approval on all of that down there.
There's a, between South Crest and the back of the commercial lots that back up to that property, there's a pretty good cliff. But I've started noticing different places in Austin, particularly over Fifth Street, on the west end of Fifth Street, where Tiniest Bar in Texas and El Arroyo are. Yeah, it's El Arroyo. The city of Austin has built a walking bridge that goes from that office building between 5th and 6th, that's at the very west end of 5th and 6th, over to, that goes over 5th Street and allows kids from the Clarksville neighborhood to get to Austin High School. But you can also get to the trails along Zilker Park and all of that. So, and it is for foot traffic. But you know, if we had a developer that wanted to do something like that, maybe that would be a possibility at some point.
Well, I also had somebody suggest the Collective Home building that's now empty.
Yes.
Where we'd had the voting,
Mhm.
they had it open up as a voting center.
In the most recent election, the city
Yeah.
council election.
But I mean, the one that's just right there when you come up, that would be a great restaurant location if we let them have rooftop dining, which would have a view of downtown. And if we let them stay open later than 10 and sell alcohol, we'd probably get lots of tax revenue from that too.
Well, that's the other use. We did have, and I don't mean to regress, but I think this is kind of good. We did have the group that has the hospital meet with us. And, you know, we can't tell them what to do with that. I don't know whether the hospital is the highest and best use of the property or not from their standpoint. But I think it could have some, it's a large tract of land, it has a lot of parking, it has a small parking garage, and I can tell you that on that track, and as well as the office building, Center 2, which is located here, they have incredible views of downtown on that, to your point. And they are on the other side of the deal, and they're not really, you know, their uses on that are pretty far apart on that.
And they don't adjoin residential property.
They have a little bit,
Or
but
a tiny
it's
bit, yeah.
Well,
behind
they got
it,
that
but
pretty much.
Not in the city of Rollingwood.
no.
Yeah. Well, and
Well, they
if you
do.
drive up, if you go visit the hospital property, go drive up on their sort of second level parking.
Mhm.
It's not really a parking garage, but if you
Yeah.
drive up there, you can see how nice the views are from that
Yeah.
property.
There's some options, I think, that they will have. They actually, this is a landowner, they lease that hospital to the hospital group that's running that.
Mhm.
So there is a finite time limit on the lease. I don't remember exactly what it was, I've got it in my notes, but it is I think I may have it, seems like I do, that they have on that. So, you know, giving properties like that as we go through this from a zoning standpoint, a option, or at least letting potential and existing landowners know that we are open to look at these type of things, I think is prudent for all of us to do. And which leads me into our future land use.
Well, just as we're talking about that hospital, isn't that whole loop of Tremont bordering that all those
There's actually,
small?
there's
I
actually.
know there's a couple of buildings in between, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're talking about this area?
yeah,
Bill. Yeah, there is an office building here.
yeah.
And actually, that office building has, thinks it has, it may very well have, a right to build that same building right next to it. Because that was envisioned when it was, when it came in, they were gonna build two buildings that came in. So, whether we know or we can find that they have that right, but they think they have that right.
On that tract or on
On
the adjoining
that
tract? On that
It,
tract.
it actually was originally designed to have two buildings identical.
Mhm.
There's two towers there, I think it's 4 stories, 3 or 4 stories, and there's supposed to be 2 of them there. One of them got built, the other one didn't.
Which building, where was this, which one was this?
What's that?
Which lot was this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
This yellow tract next
Yeah, next to
Tremont
Right.
tract.
Tremont.
Oh, next in Tremont, but between that and the hospital.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And you can't see it from the street
Okay.
currently.
Yeah.
Okay, page 24 is our future land use. And I'm gonna, for the record, I'm gonna go ahead and read our 3 takeaways that we had in that, and we'll go through there. Rollingwood residents envision a walkable, tree-filled, connected neighborhood of single-family homes with easy access to local shops and restaurants, number 1. Residential. Rollingwood residents place great value on the low-density, single-family nature of the residential area of our community and want to protect the small-town feel of our community. Number 3, commercial. Rollingwood residents support a renewal of the Bee Cave Road commercial corridor that focuses on retail and restaurants while protecting Rollingwood residents' quality of life and the properties of adjacent and nearby Rollingwood homeowners on that. And I'm going to point out that probably we had one group that Brooke and I met with and were very attentive in coming to our meetings, and it based on before any of our times. This was in the early 80s, I think, that this building was built, and apparently it was one day you were looking out over your yard, and then you had a building built basically right there behind you, looking down into your yard. I think that was the key.
Right.
And it was the city of Rollingwood, their point was, and contention was, that the city of Rollingwood did not enforce its own rules against that at the time, and they felt like they had not been given a fair shake on that, which I think we probably all would have felt that way had it been us. So, but they were, and surprisingly, either people that grew up there and still lived there, or people that owned there were still there and could and gave us the story on that. So, and they wanted to make sure. You'll see a couple things that we've tried to address some of their concerns on as we went through this, and that'll be coming up. Citizen input on the future Rollingwood. We want what we have now.
single family, low density, larger lots, and we do have, we want Rollingwood to look like it does today with the addition of our, obviously we have some architectural changes, but that's to be nature. The one thing that we had some comment on, although many residents are concerned about older and smaller homes being replaced by larger new ones, there is no widespread desire to alter current rules related to the home sizes on that. And that was based on our conversations we had, testimony we had, plus the survey results that we had come in.
Except drainage was the biggest concern.
We'll get to that one. So that's what our citizens want on that. Residents are opposed, and this is resoundingly opposed to this. Short-term rentals, do not want short-term rentals, but support allowing residents to build accessory buildings, sometimes called granny flats, on residential lots. And I'm not sure that, in retrospect, I look at that and I think, well, do we mean an actual occupied deal, or are we looking at our accessory buildings that we used as a art studio or something along that line? So I can't answer that. But we tried to make that as clear as we could in the survey, and I think the survey did make it that.
I'd be interested in seeing the question and the responses on that one.
We can
Because
get that for you.
that to me is totally inconsistent with the idea of being a single-family residential neighborhood
Yeah.
that has serious concern about drainage.
The two inconsistencies there, that one, and then if we are adamantly opposed to short-term rentals, you're talking about that, I was talking about that with Ashley, the city's ability to regulate is limited from a personnel standpoint, but that's something that we just need to be cognizant of what the wording was, and I thought the wording was straightforward. I'm just not sure how I felt about it when I answered that, to be very honest, as to what I was answering on that.
Because of, I would say of everything in here, if we're having to fix our zoning to match, our zoning ordinances to match what's in the comprehensive plan, that's the thing that worries me the most.
What I think wasn't, we didn't, the survey, this came from the survey.
Yeah.
And the survey did not define a granny flat to the extent of whether or not they're separate bathroom facilities, cooking facilities. What is a granny flat?
Yeah.
It was just, we want single-family homes. We'd like, the sense I had of it was that a separate, not a separate, an area where a grandparent or a parent could live.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we really even defined, I know we didn't define that, and we didn't discuss it.
No, and I will tell you the other caution I would give you on that is recall our last conversation, our last meeting in regard to our wastewater capacity that we have. And so as we go forward, as y'all go forward and we go forward with this, just keep that in mind from a standpoint of what we have available and what that may, could possibly have on there. We did not have a consensus specifically on estate lots, although most residents wanted to regulate any estate lot developments to protect adjacent and surrounding homes from unwanted or unintended consequences. And that's why we pay y'all the big bucks that we pay y'all to figure out what the unintended consequences are of each of these actions.
So was there a question that went the opposite direction about splitting up existing lots to make more houses?
Yes, it was, and there was a very strong support that they were not in favor, that'd make it more difficult to upzone residential zone lots in the future, both for commercial and multi-use deals.
Is that upzoning? It would still be residential.
Well, and upzoning would be residential to commercial, and we had that provision about keeping our large single-family lots.
Okay, increasing,
that.
they're not in favor of increasing density.
No.
Okay.
Because remember, I went through that, that was one of the big things we had, is we want to keep our large residential lots on that. You're thinking back on those residential PUDs back in the day, weren't you?
I'm thinking about the other ones that have already been split.
This is, Rollingwood residents identified storm drainage issues and increased traffic as among their greatest concerns in Rollingwood's residential areas. And we are looking for creative ways to better connect Rollingwood residential and commercial areas via walking paths, bicycles, and golf carts. There was also a great deal of desire to have a crosswalk across Rollingwood Drive at the park area.
Where?
Near the park.
Coming from where?
Well,
It's like we
We
don't
know
have, we
that-
don't have sidewalks.
I know.
Yeah.
You can still have a crosswalk. The only issue that I brought up even last time is when I go to the crosswalk on Walsh Tarleton, which actually does have a light, there's still a significant amount of cars that don't recognize that as a crosswalk, even when the light is flashing. So I don't like kids to be invincible, walk across a crosswalk without any kind of protection there. But that's, I'm just giving you what the data we got is. As to our Bee Cave Road corridor, I'll reiterate that again because we got this a lot. Greater connectivity between our residential area and ability to get easily to our commercial area on Bee Caves Road. Now, we do have sidewalks on Bee Caves Road, at least part of it, and hopefully in the future we'll have it on all of it. But that came up a great deal on that. Rollingwood residents, and this I know is going to surprise some of y'all, strongly oppose apartments, hotels, or large condominium development on Bee Caves Road. So, we still have a, and I should add this, even on what we have now, there's some concern about increased heights of buildings on Bee Caves Road and what that does to the effect of our residential areas on that. Okay, recommendations. Review and if necessary, create or strengthen city ordinances to protect Rollingwood tree canopy in residential and commercial areas. These are just some general deals for both residential and commercial. We'll deal with the other shortly. Create and encourage water-wise policies for landscaping in residential and commercial areas. Review and consider methods to bring additional future drainage and stormwater runoff, including additional drainage fees on new development and redevelopment, I think is what we were thinking on that, Sarah. Review and revise city ordinances to ensure that new development pays the cost they impose on drainage infrastructure. if allowable, enact rules making it more difficult to upzone properties from a residential use to a more intensive, and that goes to both your lot, intensive non-residential use.
Well, yeah, but it says intensive non-residential use, and in this case, it would still be residential.
Except for our provision that our data shows that everybody wanted larger residential lots and to maintain the character we have in Rollingwood today.
How easy is it now to change zoning from residential to commercial?
Well, that would be up to y'all, and
Well,
I'm,
no, but I mean, I didn't think it was easy to do that as it stands.
their concern is that we have certain lots that are adjacent to commercial properties that would be, that may be used for, some type of that commercial usage.
Non-single family
Non-single family usage on that.
residential uses.
It shouldn't be easy, and well, we know that, but, and in addition to the, overcoming the city hurdle, we do have subdivisions in here who have deed restrictions. I don't know how many of them are really applicable, but that is out there to think about on that. Residential recommendations, it's my favorite right here. Commission a traffic study to address residents' concerns over the amount and speed of traffic within residential areas. Look for ways to reduce cut-through traffic. Consider installation of crosswalks and pedestrian islands to permit the safe crossing of Rollingwood Drive near the park. And we may actually have enough room. I tried to look at that and see if it was possible. Y'all may, some may remember this. We actually used to have they refer to those as pedestrian refuge islands crossing a street. And we used to have one at the lower end of Rollingwood Drive with a tree there at one time.
Oh, yeah, that little triangle.
Yeah. There also used to be a big tree in the middle of Rollingwood, BK's Road. That finally got hit enough that it went away.
It was Rollingwood Drive in Vale. There was a triangular.
It's a very
Okay,
wide
yeah.
street down there.
Yeah.
This is something a traffic engineer would have to tell us whether we could, that's a viable deal to do. It does have the effect of slowing traffic down on Rollingwood Drive, I would imagine.
Why did they remove that one at Vale and Rollingwood Drive?
That's for my time too. I don't know.
I don't think it was. I think it was here when I moved in.
Might have been. I don't remember why.
I
if
don't
it was-
remember it in the 80s.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Huh. Maybe I'm dreaming. Past life.
I feel I just don't, I can't.
Okay.
tell you. Except to pave the street, and it may have been
Yeah.
removed for that. At that time, there was no vegetation on it, and it was an incredibly low triangle.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a curb there. It was, I think a lot of people ran over it, frankly. But, and it wasn't designed. I'm not sure how it got there, Phil.
Okay.
But it was. I just remember back when it was there at some time, and I if I removed it, I just forgot, to be very honest, because I can't remember it being there. In further residential recommendations, prohibit short-term rentals. Y'all may remember there's been some legal issues in regard to whether cities, how they can go about doing that. Rollingwood has an ordinance that prohibits unrelated parties that was set up on that. We may still have and that was something that we couldn't really, the Supreme Court of Texas is looking at this as to whether cities can regulate, how they regulate short-term rentals. But there was a large percentage of our respondents that really did not want short-term rentals. So, allow accessory dwellings on residential lots, we talked about that. Our connectivity between our residential and retail, commercial areas, and evaluate and consider connecting residential and commercial areas with a dedicated pathway along Old Delana Lane, which is used now, but it's kind of a broken, it's Old Delana broken up, and then ties into the Rollingwood Town Center on that. Maintain standard and uniform setback and building rules on residential lots throughout Rollingwood, regardless of whether a residential lot borders a lot that is either non-residential or outside the city of Rollingwood. Regulate estate lots as necessary to protect nearby and adjacent residential properties.
On the item right before that,
Yes,
on the maintaining the uniform setbacks,
yes.
that was an issue that the P and Z variance that came up at the last meeting that has to go back to the Board of Adjustments now, and anyway, when they were talking about that at the planning and zoning, I don't remember if it was Jordan, one of the members said, because it was a variance to request a narrower side setback along the street. And Jordan said, I don't even know if people in Rollingwood care about this anymore.
Well, they did.
And so that to me addresses the issue of maintain standard and uniform setbacks. And not that border a non-residential area, but even the ones that border other residential lots.
And I'll be honest, I brought that up primarily. We border two other cities, and you know, we have buildings that are actually built on the property line. It's a small outbuilding pump house, which they can't really get to maintain. I have to take my fence down for them to maintain it, which is okay. We're good neighbors, so it doesn't matter. But that was the issue that came about as to whether or not that would be used. The discussion was, if you bordered on that, could you go up to a comparable setback of your neighbor? And the end result of that discussion is you're opening a can of worms by doing that, and it's, you know, then your neighbor across the street from you that's in Rollingwood's gonna go, hey, he got a 5-foot setback, so, and I understand that. So that's where that came about. Commercial corridor recommendations. And we have several of those. Allow retail and office use on all commercially zoned properties and encourage restaurant development where restaurant use would not create a nuisance for adjacent residential properties. And again, I will tell you the biggest thing there is how it's designed and the exhaust system, but learning firsthand, because I think one of the first things I had as mayor coming in was an odor from a restaurant issue, and when a new tenant came in, basically similar product, put in a state-of-the-art scrubber system, no problem. So that's something that just from, as we go through, as y'all go through this, that is a way to do that. And I apologize, I meant to check on that, but I believe that restaurants do require a special use permit where you can put those type of issues out there. And if not, that would be a good thing to kind of look at, I believe. On the north side of BK's Road, limit development on commercial zone lots to 2-story with 30 feet in height. On the south side of Bee Cave Road, limit development on commercially zoned lots to 3 stories and 45 feet in height. Maintain current Rollingwood Drive setbacks between commercial buildings and Rollingwood Drive. And again, Brooke, that's a corner track specifically on Rollingwood Drive that abuts Bee Caves Road.
I saw it too.
I thought I was seeing flashing lights again, and it's not good. Prohibit the clearing of native vegetation within the FEMA floodplain on commercially zoned properties. Work with stakeholders to envision and create a safer pedestrian crossing of Bee Caves Road at Edge Grove Drive. And of course, that's a TxDOT issue that we have to deal with on that. Long-term vision, build a pedestrian bridge across Bee Cave Road within Rollingwood. Replace current setbacks between commercially zoned properties and residentially zoned properties with a 75-foot setback measured from the edge of any residentially zoned lot to the edge of any building on any commercially zoned lot. We have a lot of residences on Timberline and all the adjacent streets, and as this redevelops on the south side of north side of Bee Caves Road, there was an issue about how close these buildings should get on that.
It's 100 feet currently.
Yeah, thank you, Brooke.
So
that's correct.
any exception, if you will, for those lots on the south side of Grove Court? And the ones that are in the floodplain where you can't have a house? I mean, because if you have to have that 75 feet from the residential lot, that makes a big difference in how much distance you'd have to have if the house itself is not only not on that lot, but it's across the street from.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I just didn't know if that had been considered or not.
You may want to amend this to just say a buildable residential lot, and that would cover that. Although, as you're sloping down on that, the whole purpose of this, and I think you'll see here what we're trying to get to that may not make that too much. To reduce the number of egress and ingress points on Bee Caves Road, eliminate any existing code provision that requires a driveway on every commercially zoned lot. And this would obviously mean that, I think y'all know what we were talking about there is just if we have the ability to have a smaller number of driveways where the properties come together on that. Encourage the building of hiking and biking paths on commercially zoned lots along the south side of Dry Creek, sometimes called Eanes Creek, on the north side of Bee Caves Road. There's some places that can possibly be done on the lot line areas. Most of that may require something, if there's restaurants there, having a bike path may be beneficial to them, and they may, but I think this is where we use the word encourage on that. Enforcement. The city shall require an as-built survey as part of any final permitting and certification of occupancy for all new commercial development. In addition, the city should exercise its full discretion and employ all means to enforce all development rules regulating commercially zoned lots. Just say this came about because of some of the history that dated back now 40 years ago on some of the development that occurred. Modify development standards as necessary based on the following recommendations. The front setback for commercial properties along the north side of Bee Cave Road be reduced from the current 25-foot setback to a 5-foot setback where the developer has agreed to contribute any required right-of-way to TxDOT and implement a landscape plan, including appropriate irrigation and maintenance that provide native species shade trees along the sidewalk and rear lot pedestrian paths. New developments that we look at now are pushing to the road with parking behind it. And if we're gonna have retail and restaurants, that's kind of what we would encourage to do.
What is the right of way along bee caves? What do they typically require?
It varies on how they maneuver the road, and that's gonna be, it probably is, Sarah, the only properties that would probably affect would be, on a redevelopment standpoint, would be that corner of Bee Caves Road that would be there at, the point of of Rollingwood and Bee Caves Road. Cause the rest of it's already been, the right-of-way's been given.
And the 5 feet here is in addition to whatever TxDOT
Yeah.
requires as a right of
Our
way.
5-foot set,
Right,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering
how much they're gonna
how
ask for.
close to the actual street that is.
I-
You
what-
know, I mean, 'cause
Oh, well, TxDOT usually has, and it varies, but they'll engineer an area where they they may take, 20 feet and use 10 of it, and they'll have, 10 feet. If you go look at what's like there now, you'll notice a little area that's not being landscaped, or sometimes it's not being landscaped. And that's TxDOT. TxDOT took an average of about 20 feet and used about 10 on the first section. Now, they may do different on this next section, but all the first section donated their right-of-way anyway.
I was just wondering how close that would actually put the buildings to the street itself.
Well, they're gonna have the same thing. They're gonna have a bike lane, I would guess, a bike lane, a sidewalk, and then they have a little green belt there, and then they have, that's, and then the property line would start 5 feet back from that.
And
The bit
part of the
that-
part of the concerns were that along the north side of Bee Caves Road, the lots are pretty shallow. And so instead of being able to go up, we looked at ways we could reduce the setback. The other thing that happens when you reduce the setback where buildings come closer to the road, visually, it narrows your field of vision, so traffic slows.
Yeah.
And so that was another consideration. And then, if you think about the Chinatown development, all the parking is in front. If we could encourage the buildings to come closer to the road with parking in the back and a path back there, that would be more in line with what residents are saying they want than the current process where all the parking has to be in front. So those were some of the, I would say, compromises that are balancing of issues in order to create an additional building area that would encourage nicer retail and restaurants.
Well, it also
So
might
it's a
make them,
compromise.
might make them more visible,
Yes,
Which
So that's
would
what it does too.
get them
Exactly.
more business as well.
right. And then Tom will get to it, but one of the other things is to permit commercial properties to share driveways. So
Yeah.
you lessen the amount of turning on Bee Caves Road and you get more bang for your buck with fewer driveways.
Makes it a safer road, for sure. Impervious cover. We spent a great deal of time going through this and negotiating. City should establish commercial impervious cover requirements such that impervious cover shall not exceed 55%, provided that no new project development will create any increase to stormwater runoff, either volume or rate of flow of runoff. Currently, the impervious cover limitation on commercial properties is 50%. So we're saying go up to 55, but contain your water, which I think is appropriate way to do that. Incentives, the development code should incentivize permanent low-impact development such as rainwater harvesting, bioretention, rain gardens, green roofs, infiltration, and filter strips. And for that, there is provided you can, if you do that and do these things, and we're leaving that kind of open to the engineers to certify that they do this, and the city has to agree with this, that they could have an additional 10% of their impervious cover. That they're provided that there's no increase to stormwater runoff, either volume or rate of flow. The site plan meets all TCEQ best practices, best management practices for water quality, and meets the design elements described below, and I'll go through those. Certification, all requirements associated with impervious cover incentives, stormwater management, and water quality be mandatory, not subject to variance, and enforced by requirements for engineering certification that the design meets all requirements as initially submitted in the permitting process, and for engineering certification that the design as built meets all impervious cover, stormwater management, and water quality requirements before the issuance of any CO. The issue gets to be, we tried to put as much incentive in there to do these things, but also make sure that it is covered from both the city and, let's see, we got at least one engineer here, and my guess is engineers, maybe two,
Different, maybe three.
could be. But engineers don't like to sign a certification, put their name and their deal on there without making sure it's correct.
They shouldn't like to do that.
Yes, we're designed about that. Design requirements to lessen impact of commercial developments adjacent to residential properties. Where roofs are visible from adjacent residential lots, the city should adopt appropriate design requirements that mask and or eliminate the impact of building mechanical units that we have on there. And you can do that a lot of different ways. We tried to leave this so that people could come up with innovative ways to do that. You could do it with green roofs, you could do it with shielding, some way to do it on that. Require all solar panels be masked, and require the site plan to provide a vegetative buffer and safety feature between a residential lot and a commercial lot where there is no green belt or line of sight buffer between the commercial lot and any residential lots. And that the topography issue is also there. I apologize, I missed that. And then the next thing we had is lighting. And we had a number of our residents that expressed some concerns about, well, gee, you know, we put this up, it's across BK's road, it's, you know, it's lit up all night, and it's causing an issue. So this is something that we had. The city should adopt lighting design criteria to eliminate the impact of adjacent residential properties, down shielding nighttime lights, and adopt standards consistent with the dark skies lighting policies of similarly sized Central Texas Hill Country communities. And we thank Brooke for researching all this and coming up with some of the issues that we have on that. I would say that one of the interesting things that I probably should have known and didn't know is that many building owners have figured that they leave the lights on all night. It's cheaper for them than cutting them off and on, which I was kind of surprised about that, and I'm still not sold on that, but because I cut off lights all the time and thinking I'm doing good. But that's something that the city can look at. I'll point out one other thing. Parking garages are an incredible issue at night. And remember, night might be 5:30 at certain times of the year, but we had that issue on Rollingwood Town Center, and we had a agreeable, this is after it was built, after it was approved, and we had a developer who was willing to work with us and actually shield those headlights as they come up and were shining into our residential areas, and camouflage the whole building for as best he could on that. And so, you know, lesson learned. I didn't even think about that back 25 years ago, but that's an issue that's coming in, and some of, as we get more of these buildings that have parking garages or parking, it doesn't even have to be a parking garage, it can be angled parking up or anything. It could be a issue, and I think the city needs to start looking at light issues that come on there. The Dark Skies Initiative, I thought, was an excellent idea that we would have from a commercial standpoint. That was keeping with the biggest item that we had people do is we want to make this a residential area that we're like now, that we enjoy on that, and that's it. We'd all like to have more tax money, but that was secondary to keeping our city livable as it is on that. Landscaping, shade, setbacks, incentives for commercial properties. Require that landscaping within the setback along BK's Road, where possible, and along any residential walkways include sufficient trees to shade sidewalks and pedestrian paths. Employ a tree ordinance similar to that in residential areas that will preserve heritage trees, that require placement of heritage trees with a tree or trees of the same species and have the same total caliber, inches, and require replacement of other protected trees so as to maintain the current tree canopy. And the whole issue with this is, as this area is redeveloped on commercial along BK's Road, that it becomes less, it's not any more visible to our residential properties on Timberline and adjacent streets than it is now on that. Safe harbor, the city should permit the renovation if necessary of rebuilding of existing structures on commercially zoned lots, provided that this renovation or rebuilding was in compliance with our ordinance at the time it was built, is limited to the footprint of the existing structure. Update commercial signage, and this is one where I suggest it be done fairly quickly. If you look at our signage ordinance today, we deal with what's the name of that stuff? Neon. And I don't think you can get it anymore except in a specialty shop. So I would suggest that be looked at. It's maybe ask P&Z to start reviewing that sign ordinance, because I think it needs to be updated. Post-permit enforcement and penalties. Again, this is, we're comfortable right now that the city would take care of enforcement, but we sometimes times change, and we get developers that may change something and not get the proper permits, and we do this.
Let the trees die.
Let the trees die, address, come up with a plan for shielding that fails, and also come up with a impervious cover incentive that is coming back to do that.
And not
And
maintain it, yeah.
To that
Install a
to-
green roof,
Yes.
and then let it die.
There's a lot of things that can happen on that, and we'd like to do that. Now, this is a fairly strongly worded deal, and I'm just going to read it because I'd like for that to be on the record. The zoning ordinance by post-permit enforcement and penalties. The zoning ordinance for the commercial property should include provisions sufficient to permit the revoking of occupancy permits in the event the owner fails to maintain compliance with any permit requirements, including impervious cover incentives, landscaping, shade, setback requirement, and our dark sky requirements. In addition to use of all fines and other enforcement provisions, including daily financial penalties for non-compliance. If we're gonna give incentives, we have to absolutely be certain that these provisions are maintained so that these are not something that can be backed off on as it comes up. Any questions? And I would suggest that, and Sarah will get you a copy of that question on the survey.
Yeah,
think
that
it-
just seems inconsistent to me with other wishes, which doesn't mean that people can not answer things inconsistently, but, that really concerns me because
I tried to think about that when I was going through it, reviewing this and thinking, how did I answer that? What was I thinking when I answered that? And quite frankly, I was thinking, gee, I can make Sandra a art studio, and I can take over her current art studio and make it into a big poker room.
Do we have any hands up from the public, Ashley?
We
Oh.
do not.
Okay.
Thank you, Bert. Got it. You know how I am about hands up on Zoom calls. I can never see them. I can barely read on this. I'm gonna have to get the bigger print now when I come up on that.
I do have one question, Tom. When
Yes,
we
sir.
were talking about the lighting with the neon, I know now the LED lights are even brighter than
Yeah.
neon in a lot of. Wouldn't that be dealt with on a case-by-case basis as
I think that
developer?
if you look at our sign ordinance, a lot of it pertains to neon. And I think that was pre-LED, and I think it would be prudent to revise that and bring it up to date with the current options that come in on that.
Sure.
And just because when you look at it, you kind of go, gee, this thing is 20 years out of date. And I don't have anything with old age. I like it. But that's something that I think should be done.
Well, it sounds to me like really what we would be looking at is, the brightness, how many looms or whatever at
And,
certain
and
distance.
down shielding.
And down shielding.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
You
and-
can still
and-
have security lights, but the down shielding prevents the light from escaping upwards.
Right.
And the lights on in buildings. We really don't have an ordinance that pertains to that. And that was something that several people brought up, that this was a concern to them on that.
Yeah, especially if we start getting two-story development along
That
BKs
we
with the
had some
office.
people complaining that even the banks on the south side of Bee Caves Road, the lights being left on it all night required them to get the light
Shades,
shielding
yeah.
drapes
Black-
in their
blackout
houses
light.
along
Yeah.
Timberline.
Yep.
And, this is, most of the time, we dealt with this on some of our PUDs. And I think they, again, they went above and beyond what they had to do, but they did it to be good neighbors, and God bless them for doing that.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know, we didn't know until it was operating, and it actually operated for a couple of years, and then somebody said, these lights, people coming in the driveway here or the parking garage are really irritating. And I said, well, I hadn't heard anything about it. And they said, oh yeah, here, talk to all my neighbors. And they said, oh yeah, this is terrible. And I went, well, we'll see what we can do. And they did do it, so
And
bless them.
the dark skies thing doesn't, from what I've read, doesn't seem to add a level of expense. It's
No.
just being more intentional about the lighting
Yeah.
design.
Yeah.
Sure.
And,
So,
and I want to thank Brooke for bringing the dark skies up when we did that and doing the research on that. And I thought that was an excellent suggestion, because actually Brooke had done that prior to us getting some of the comments that we got
Mhm.
from our residents about, you know, I was concerned about buildings on the north side of BK's Road and the lighting impact. They were being impacted by buildings on the south side of BK's Road.
Mhm.
Right.
Which, you know, as LEDs and as lights get brighter, you know, and different shades of lights, so.
Yeah, and I
Anyway.
think that if we allow, like, on the north side, if buildings start, we put the parking in the back of the buildings, it's gonna be right outside.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Some-
the shading of
Mhm.
the lights becomes increasingly more important.
Mhm.
Well, but I
Uh,
think what he's talking about is the headlights from the
Yeah.
cars.
Yeah.
If they're on,
Sure. Could be.
um,
And that's something that, but again, that's a design feature that can be done, because we found that out with shielding on the backside of that, how that works on that.
mhm.
Most of the, I guess the 2 or 3 that would be there actually go down to the creek. So the headlights would be coming down, that I'm thinking of, Alex, but that's a good
Mhm.
point. And again, it's a design feature that we look at when, that we should incorporate in there to protect our residents on that,
Okay.
so. Any other questions? Thank
Anything
you.
else?
And Sarah, we'll make sure we get that, data to you on that, so.
Anything else we have?
Thank
Okay,
y'all.
motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
I move we adjourn the
Okay.
second
All in favor?
Rollingwood Town Hall. And for those still online, we'll be setting a date at this next council meeting for the third town hall. So,
Okay.
Wide attendance.
Meeting adjourned.